Hello, my name is Sophie, if you do not know me yet, and today I'm going to discuss with you all my five-star reads of 2025 so far. I am admittedly copying my friend Sarah, or Books with Sawa, if that's how she pronounces it. I am copying her format with this video because I find it deeply satiating and fun to watch. So, thank you, Sarah, for your inspiration. I appreciate it, and you. But like I said, today, five-star reads. I've filmed this a few times and was discussing other books, but the more I talk about them, the more my opinions shift on what I really feel about them, so I'm narrowing it down for myself for ease of mind. But the first book that we're going to discuss today is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This book had, in the moment, and to this day, really shifted my perspective on death and OCD, and that it gave me a different point of view that I hadn't originally possessed when dealing with my OCD. And that is a rare occurrence because if you know anything about OCD, you know that it is a cyclical behavioral disorder of sorts that involves thinking about literally everything all the time, specific to whatever it is that you're maybe afraid of. At least that's what it is for me. And to be given a new perspective on something like death is just really rare. So, I Who Have Never Known Men follows a girl who never has a name. She's the narrator, and she is a prisoner underground in a bunker with 39 older women. She's the youngest of them. And one day they escape the prison for no apparent reason. They don't know where they are or who they are or how they got there, and they don't know why they can escape, but they do, only to wind up in a different kind of prison. And that is where I'll leave it as far as synopses go, but Hartman did an excellent job with this book, and I really loved it. It took me a second to get into because it is a triggering read, especially if you don't normally go down this avenue of genres. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. She made it feel so real, so plausible, and it's not a happy book, but it certainly is a transformative one and one that I would recommend. I don't want to spoil it because you'll either love it or you'll hate it, but you should give it a try if you haven't already. So that's my first five-star of the year. Next in my five-star list of books that I've read this year would be Strange Pictures by Uketsu. Uketsu is a ghostwriter of sorts from Japan. No one knows who he or she or they are. They are enigmatic and just unknown, but Strange Pictures is a horror fiction that is separated into four pieces, so I suppose an anthology. And in each of those stories lies a photo, and that photo slash drawing is what that story revolves around in some way or another. And by the end of the book, you'll see how each of these photos ties in together in a really macabre, unsettling, and gripping way. It is a very unique read, a very fast one, and I'm saying that as a slow reader. But as you can see, there are drawings like that in it. And I mean it's all throughout the book. But a really unique one, and it really it really delighted me. It made me think for quite a while, and I really just loved it a lot. So if you can get your hands on this, I highly recommend it. Uketsu just came out with another book called, I can't remember what it's called, but I'll put it like right here. I have not read that one yet, but I've been wanting to pick it up at Half Price Books because if it's anything like Strange Pictures, I know I'm going to enjoy it a lot. Next, we have, and I have to say, this is one of my favorites, although these are all 5 stars. This was just really, really a great book. Donna Tartt's The Secret History. This book was such a game changer for me. It really took me back to House of Anubis from Nickelodeon, if you are aware of what that is. It is like very secret society, a little daring, a little out there. There's quite a bit of controversial dialogue scattered throughout this book, but that made it more fun, made it feel a little bit more honest. And I also really enjoyed, this was a book club book, by the way, as was the first one by Jacqueline Hartman. But this was interesting because after having read several books in our book club narrated by females, this one was narrated by a man named Richard. And Richard is a unique character, and right off the bat, you have a hard time distinguishing if he is good or evil. And there comes a point about halfway through, because this book is divided by part 1 and part 2, where you kind of realize that those lines are going to remain blurred for each of the people in the classics group in this book. Regardless, very dense but deeply provocative and so well written. I really loved Donna Tartt's method of writing and immersing you in the story and in the experience of killing somebody. It is a murder mystery, so there is that, which is something that I'm really into. Not murder, but murder mysteries. Yeah, it's really fun. Each of the characters too have such unique qualities that almost makes them more difficult to picture, and at the same time are so vividly described that they pop off the page. It is a very strange but beautiful read, and if you haven't already, I recommend giving this one a shot. Next on my list of 5 stars, one second, I have to pull up my list on my tablet here. Next on my list of 5 stars was The Stranger by Albert Camus. He is a French author, and I really loved this book. This book was for my own pleasure. It was a book that I read outside of book club, but it really it really fit well with The Secret History by Tartt, because this too is about murder, but from a different point of view, and yet from a very similar one. Like the narrator is kind of a sociopath, and there are themes of that in The Secret History that I found really fascinating. But obviously a very quick read. Uh it's only 123 pages, but it's about a man whose mother in France, maman, whose mother is killed or dies or something. I can't remember. And in part 2, he ends up killing somebody. And I won't say more than that, but it is a really fascinating one, and it stuck with me for a while. It kind of it's one of those books that makes you question morals and right and wrong and what it really does to a person to end another person's life. And this one was also written quite a while ago, so there are definitely some elements of misogyny and abuse and things like that. So keep that in mind. That's my trigger warning to you all. But if you haven't yet, this is another excellent read. So the next book that we have here is Almond by Won Pyung Sun. I originally wasn't a huge fan of this book. I remember going for coffee with a few of my girlfriends and saying that to them. You know, after reading Camus and Tart, I didn't really like this author's writing style because it felt a little bit elementary in comparison. But the more I read, the more I felt connected to this character and his story and the things that he went through. And for a short synopsis, it's about a boy who has, where is it? Alexithymia, or the inability to identify and express one's feelings. So it's this disorder that the boy has that kind of makes him an anomaly to kids his age, to adults, to pretty much everybody who doesn't really get to know him. And in this book, he experiences a tragedy, a really, really dark and gruesome tragedy that I will say is explicitly described in this novel. So keep that in mind if you are apprehensive to read through gore. But it was a really moving book. It really warmed my heart. I loved how it panned out. It surprised me is what I would say. Originally I found it hard to read her writing because it was just so opposite from Camus and from Tart, meaning it was much less descriptive. Each chapter was like a page long or around there. So many chapters, but very, very, very short. It was digestible, but it was just a very different pace from what I prefer. That said, as I read through the book and got to know the main character and alexithymia and what that means for this boy, the more I really enjoyed it. And that's because alexithymia and the nature of it is honestly like The Stranger and The Secret History, very sociopathic feeling. It edges on that, and so it fit these other books quite well, but it was just a more tender and innocent point of view that I was uncomfortable with at first, but really grew to love by the end. So this is a good one. I recommend it if you haven't read it already. Yeah, and has a cute cover. Second to last 5-star book that I read this year, I don't have it on me because I've lent it to one of my besties, is, excuse me, Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner was such an impeccable read. I read that only recently, and it was for book club. It was our last book club book that we read. I deeply enjoyed this book. I found it very surprising. I hear my bunnies. I found this book to be very surprising, and that's because it's a memoir written by Michelle Zauner. Michelle Zauner is the lead vocalist in Japanese Breakfast, the band. And I don't know, I've just never willingly read a memoir, and enjoyed it. I'm much more of a fiction girly, and it really, really took me off guard that I enjoyed this honest reflection of, again, death. This book follows Michelle, obviously, and the experience she had with tragically losing her mom to cancer. And if somebody told me that that's what a book they wanted me to read was about, I honestly would not read it because that makes me uncomfortable and because that sounds like it would be, well, I would say it's boring, but that would be me masking my own discomfiture with reading things about tragic loss. I would not have read this book, but I'm so glad that I did. I'm so glad that we picked it for book club last month because it really, really shifted my perspective on a lot of things. It warmed my heart. It made me cry. It was the first book that I've read this year that really made me cry constantly. And I love that. I feel like I get so in my head usually with crying, and I tend not to. But if a book can get me there, especially a nonfiction one, that says something about the author and their story and the way that they retell it. And it's not just because her mom died, but truthfully the way she shared it and connected it back to reality and to who she is now, and also to Korean cuisine. That was a big component of it, and I really loved the way that she shared it. I found it so, so fantastic. And I would recommend it to anybody, especially to people who have experienced loss and to those who haven't, because at one point you will, because you're a human being. But I also recommend it to daughters, to mothers. I saw my mom and I in this book so much. We aren't Korean, obviously, but we are a mother and daughter, and we have certainly experienced some trials and tribulations over the years. And while we have mostly surpassed those, it still made me look inward a bit and consider things I normally have a hard time considering. Like, okay, if my mom dies tomorrow, will I regret anything? Will I kick myself for having said or having done something? Will I wish I asked her if she still resented me for my teenage years? Do I feel our relationship is lacking things that will bother me when my mom is gone? I, because of this book, had opportunities, several of them, to ask her those questions, and it opened up a lot of discussion between her and and I hope that it continues to, because there are a lot of things that I'm still thinking about as a result of this book. She also read it and gave it only 3 stars, but I'm curious what she would think of it now after her and I have talked about it, because a lot of the time opinions can shift, especially once you've talked to somebody else about it. So I recommend that one. I really, really do. And then I recommend looking into Michelle's honor and her life and Japanese breakfast, listening to Japanese breakfast, watching YouTube videos of her discussing crying in H Mart. I mean, it's just a really, really great book, and you're missing out if you don't read it. Finally, on my list of 5 stars is a classic, a tried and true, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This book is one that I lack the appropriate vocabulary to describe. It is an excellent novel if you are unfamiliar. If you're unfamiliar, you're weird and I'm judging you. And if you haven't read it, then there's something wrong with you. I'm not gonna lie. Read this book. Watch the movies. Well, don't watch the movies. Don't. They aren't like the book. They're very Hollywood capitalistified, and I'm not as big of a fan of the movies. Although, if you can get your hands on the fan edit of The Hobbit, then watch that because that's very similar to Lord of the Rings. I read this because I had read bits and pieces of it growing up. I had obviously watched it a bajillion times. I know the Lord of the Rings stories like the back of my hand. I love J.R.R. Tolkien and his history and his connection to, or lack thereof, to industry and how it destroys the planet and things like that. I love that man. I love everything about this story. I love how he wrote this for his kids. I love how the hobbits are emblematic of children and the power that little people can have in a big world, and it is just such a good book, and if you haven't read it, I really, really think that you should because it is a classic piece of literature. And again, you are missing the fuck out. So, after I finished The Hobbit, I decided that I would go so far as to read all of the Lord of the Rings books, which might not sound that daunting, but if you know anything about Lord of the Rings and the books, then you would know that those books are invariably dense and not like Donna Tartt dense. I envision them as like twice as dense as The Secret History, which I mean, fortunately I know that I enjoy that now, but it's still definitely going to be a challenge. But I've started reading The Fellowship of the Ring in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm very excited because I'm a nerd and I'm going to Japan in like 36 hours, so I need a good book. And I'm also, for book club, we just voted and decided on Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte for our next read. So these are my two that I will be reading on the plane and while I'm in Japan. And hopefully they will be new additions to my 5-star list. I mean, we already know Lord of the Rings will be, but maybe Miss Bronte will be on that list as well. So those are my 5-star books. This is a 26 and 30-second video, and I am done sharing. I think that that is it. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you again to Books with Sarah, for inspiring this format of video. And if you enjoyed it, let me know. I will see you all again very, very soon. Bye.